You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
Maimonides explains in Hilchot Nazirut, the laws of Naziriteship,
that if someone swore to become a Nazir, he promised to be a Nazir, that means not to cut hair and come into contact with a dead body or to drink wine. And if someone made this oath and then broke it, he actually receives lashes. And Maimonides says shtaim. He gets 2 sets of lashes. Once, because there's a prohibition on not breaking one's word. And then the other, because the prohibition on transgressing the unique prohibitions that apply to a Nazir. Now, the Mishnah doesn't go into the details of whether it's 1 or 2. And apparently is not that interested in the fact of applying lashes at all, but it's really interested in what would happen to someone who swore to become a Nazir, or in this case, a Nazirah, a woman who swore to become a Nazirah, broke her oath, but prior to breaking the oath, was released from it by her husband. And we know the Mishnah is always interested in edge cases, and of course is always interested in the interrelationship between Nazirut and Nadarim, between being a Nazir and swearing oaths. So the Mishnah begins, and now we're in the 4th chapter, in the 3rd Mishnah. Aisha she'nadra b'nazir hayta shorta b'yayin u'mitama metim. A woman who becomes a Nazirah and then drinks wine or is defiled by her corpse, sofeget et ha'arba'im. She receives 40, and these are the 40 lashes prescribed by the Torah. The Gemara learns out, of course, famously that we don't give 40, we give 39, because we always give one less, but they're still referred to in the Mishnah as the 40. But the Mishnah goes on to say, if her husband annulled it for her, so in this case, the husband has annulled the vow, she didn't know. She didn't know that her husband had annulled it. At this point, she might drink wine or become defiled by a corpse, but she doesn't receive the 40. So in other words, even though she's unaware that she's been released from her vow, she's still released from the punishment. And Rabbi Yehuda is going to disagree. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, even though Rabbi Yehuda says, even though she doesn't get the 40, Tispog makot mardut, she should receive lashes for disobedience. So for Rabbi Yehuda, there's something about breaking the commandment of the Chachamim, which is incredibly important and seemingly just as important as the commandment from the Torah related to Nazirut. And there is an opinion in the Gemara, by the way, that the 40 related to breaking the commandments of the sages are not actually reduced by 1. In other words, somehow the breaking the commands of the sages, even though this is a rabbinic idea, is treated more seriously than breaking a mitzvah d'oraita, a mitzvah from the Torah. What if she'd already set aside sacrifices for her Nazirut before her husband annulled her vow? In this case, we're going to interrelate with the law about Hekdesh, about material dedicated to the temple that can't be used for the temple, because clearly she can't bring the sacrifice. She's not a Nazirah, but we can't use it for any other purpose. And so the Mishnah continues. A woman who became a Nazirah, if we shah et behemutah, he actually set aside her. Remember, there are going to be 3 sacrifices plus loaves of bread brought to the temple when she cuts her hair. So she set aside the animals, but then her husband annuls her husband annuls her vow. If the husband belonged to her, if the animal belonged to her husband, it can go out and it can be put to pasture with the herd. So we assume, in other words, that if the animal belonged to her husband, we assume when he annulled the vow, he effectively annulled the dedication of the animal at the same time. That's a simple example. But if it's her animal, it's more complicated because it's still dedicated. But if the animal belonged to her, the sin offering has to die. We can't do anything with the animal that was designated as a sin offering. It has to be left to die. Rashi actually suggests that we starve it to death. Interestingly, the Bartanura doesn't bring us in. It just says, look, we just wait until it dies. We can't use it for anything. We can't bring it as an offering. We just have to let it alone. Can't do it anymore. Obviously, the burnt offering we can just bring as a burnt offering. And the whole offerings, the peace offerings, can be brought as peace offerings. With certain differences, they're each on the same day, unlike regular peace offerings, because that's the law of Nazir. But they don't require bread. They don't require the bread that's brought when the Nazir completes their term and when they cut their hair and they actually bring their hair on the altar with the bread. So the offerings are just brought as offerings, but with some slight differences. What if she'd specified money? So Kaufman says here, Hayu lo ma'ot stumim. Just general money, just general unspecified money had been dedicated. And Kaufman actually mentions this in the masculine. This is probably a scribal error from the Mishnah, a couple of Mishnayot down, where a man is being talked about. But here a woman is being talked about, and almost all printed texts have Hayula. She had set aside some money. He specified some money. Just in general. In general, she'd set aside some money. Not he. So what are we going to do? Well, the Mishnah rules it'll just go it'll just go and be spent on voluntary offerings. Because we can give the money to the temple to be spent on voluntary offerings. What if she specified specifically which coins were going to be used for which sacrifices? This is more difficult because it's as if she dedicated that money for the specific sacrifices. Ma'ot mufurashim, with specified money. What are we going to do? Well, we said that the sin offering had to be just left. We couldn't benefit from it. We just had to leave it to die. But how can you leave money to die? Money will never die. Let's see. The money for the sin offering is to be taken to the Dead Sea. So you throw it into the Dead Sea. What can you do with money to kill it? Well, you can't do anything except throw it in. So we're going to throw the money for the sin offering in the Dead Sea. The use of it is forbidden, but the laws of sacrifice don't. As far as the other money is concerned, we're going to treat it as if it was sacrifice. So the money for the burnt offering, well, we're going to bring a burnt offering. And all the laws of sacrilege apply. The money for the peace offerings, well, we just bring peace offerings. And then they're eaten on the same day as we've already burnt. And they don't need bread to be brought with them, because this is instead of the peace offerings for the end of the Nazirut. We're not really going to cut hair and sacrifice it on the altar with the bread as we would on other situations.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.